Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Empowerment. My name is David McLeod, your life mastery coach, and today is a great day because we're going to be talking about something that, well, it's been a challenge for me most of my life, but especially since I started doing personal growth work. This idea of getting my ego mind out of the way so that I can come back to my spiritual essence. Not only has it been a challenge, but I find that sometimes it's a continual challenge. It's something that I have to work on every single day. It's something that I suspect most people have to deal with one way or another. And I thought it would be great for us to have this conversation because it's something that I believe we all have to deal with. So I'm excited about it. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Gail. Welcome to Scott. Welcome to Sarah. Thank you all for being here. My co-hosts, my co-managers, my cohort. So I'm going to let you all introduce yourself. And today I'm going to start with you, Scott.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm borrowing that from Sarah. I love that. Everything she says. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, no matter where you are in the world. I love that. Hi, I'm Scott Holmes. I live down south of Boston. I am an intuitive integrated healer, and I get on a regular basis to talk to these beautiful people sitting next to me.
Virtually. Yeah. You know, it's strange that you mentioned that. Of all these people on this panel, the only one I've met in person is Sarah. Which is, yeah, it's and that was quite a few years ago. But that doesn't mean we don't have real relationships, even though we meet in virtual spaces. So, well, thank you for that, Scott. And Gail, I'd like for you to go next, if you don't mind.
I would love to. Thank you. Speaking of relationships, I'm Gail Nowak, and I help spirit-led coaches and healers and leaders in wellness create authentic, healthy business relationships without hiding or silencing yourself so that you can communicate boldly, you can lead lovingly, and you can make the world a better place. And I use an energy-first, healing-centered approach to lead you from hiding in plain sight to becoming a bold and gentle leader in the new earth paradigm.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. Heart-centered leadership. That's what I think we're all really about, isn't it? You know, one way or another. We might not use those same words, but that's what we're all doing, I believe. So thank you for being here, Gail. And next, but certainly not least, Sarah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane. No, I'm not going to say it, Scott. Not at the moment. I will be in an hour and a half. Because I am also the founder of Gift of Healing TV. And Scott joins me a couple of times a month for our Today's Conversation program. And that's how I always start the program. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Because I love the fact that we connect with people all over the world, and people can listen at different times. They can listen to the recordings. I'm about sharing, about getting information out there, helping others to share health and wellness. It's really important. And I'm a complementary health practitioner myself, energy healing in the form of Reiki sound. And I think I just love having these conversations. And I think that the conversation we actually had to set this program up actually kicked me out of my comfort zone, but we can come back to that.
Come back to what? Getting kicked out of your comfort zone, or coming back to your comfort zone?
Getting kicked out of it.
Isn't that what we all want? Yeah. We like to be comfortable, don't we? And that's part of our challenge, I think. When we're comfortable, everything seems perfect, and you know, we don't have a lot of fear running our lives and so forth. But the truth is, if we step outside that comfort zone, it really isn't that scary. It's just that we believe it's going to be scary because of that old nasty thing that I was talking about at the beginning, the ego mind. And it's always saying, oh, you'll never succeed, you'll never do okay, you're always going to fail, you're never going to get further than you did the last time. Quit trying, blah, 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 blah. It's just an ongoing litany of things that the ego mind just wants to say. And I mean, those are the kinds of words I hear. I suspect that you all have slightly different patterns, but pretty much the same message, I would think. And that's what the ego mind does. It has this bizarre idea that if I die, if my personal essence physically dies, then the ego mind dies and ceases to exist. So everything it's doing is trying to keep itself going. And so it rephrases that as if it's trying to keep me safe, And I think part of that phraseology is that we tend to identify with our ego mind until we start doing some personal growth work and start realizing, wait a minute, ego mind is just something I have. It's not who I am. In the same way that this body is something that I happen to have right now. I'm not my body. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my words. I'm not my ideas. I'm not the roles that I play in the world. Those are all just expressions that come about as a result of who I am and how I'm trying to show up in this world and in this universe. So the ego mind is something that wants to stay alive, wants to be in control, wants to be in charge, and will do everything in its power to get that. And so a big part of our challenge is to grow beyond the ego, to transcend it. And part of that process, by the way, we titled this thing From Spiritual Ego to Spiritual Essence. Part of that process is for the ego to become spiritualized. And so sometimes you'll hear people who are very deep in their ego sounding very spiritual. But really, if you listen from the heart, from the soul, you will know the truth of whether that is really spiritual or just something that's coming from ego. And it takes work, it takes effort. So I think that's what this conversation is really all about, and I spent way too long talking about it. So I'm just going to go and open the floor, and whoever would like to speak, please just say something.
Shall I start? Why did it kick it out? Why did it throw me out of my comfort zone? Now, I see my comfort zone actually as being outside of me. And to step outside of my comfort zone is to actually step back into me, into the pure essence of who I am. And I see the ego mind. Yeah, all the words we're using, I was thinking, but the ego mind is repeating all those words we've heard that were negative about ourselves. It's just holding on to and grasping at, because those words were actually quite controlling and manipulative of us. And of course, with the mind being able to use those, the ego mind being able to use those with the hope again of controlling us and manipulating us. And so by stepping outside of that, so therefore stepping back into yourself. But why did I feel kicked out of my comfort zone? Because you use these two lovely terms, spiritual ego, spiritual essence. And I thought, what the heck are they? And I just sort of, and I went really quiet. And I know I emailed you all. And David, you'd obviously gone into an idea of your perception of that. And so I know I came back with my thoughts about that. And I realized that I knew exactly what you were talking about. I'd just never given it a name. And I was never aware of a name for it. So what I would say to anybody listening to this program is there are going to be times when things like that happen to you. And you can try asking. And hopefully somebody will be able to explain it in a way that you understand. You can just try sitting and listening, which is what I did, and then slowly turning it over in my mind and thinking, okay, I think this is what they mean. We talked in that session also, Scott, about who are we trying to aim these programs at? And I think every level, you know, I've been doing this for 20 odd years now, but I was still thrown by terminology I hadn't heard before. So it's not just for those who've been doing this for a while, because there are going to be those of us who have been doing it for a while and still don't know what are they talking about. So that's all I would say is that, and I didn't go into, I think, anything ego or whatever. I think it was just, I have no idea what they're talking about. I do now. Well, I always did. So, but yes,
Right.
I think, yeah, and I'm quite happy to move away from that now, but I think an explanation of that and hoping that people will think, okay, let's listen and understand.
Yep. That's great. Yep. Scott, you look like you were ready to pounce there.
Not a pouncing, but when this came up, it reminded me of the path. And David, you've spoken about this a number of times about your path, your journey throughout all of this, throughout healing, throughout the inner work, shadow work, and all of those other aspects of ourselves. And when I first got it, and I had that aha moment, I said, wow, everyone should know about this. And I should be the one telling everybody all about this. I would see people walking down the street and I'd say, I know how to fix them. I can do that. I know. I want to share this with the world. And it was just that excitement. Talk about ego mind, right? And as I've worked further and further through this, I fully understand that it's me. The only changes that I can affect are within me. And therefore, when I come into contact with people, is when that I can then change their perception of me, their perception of life, their perception of themselves, because I am a better me. And so all the work, and Sarah, I know what you mean about out and in. All my adult life, I lived without. I could fix every problem. I could keep as long as I kept it at arm's length, by the way, I could function. You get in here and, oh man, it's a mess. And it wasn't until I really did the work, inner work, to find my essence, what it actually was, and not feel that it was a negative, not feel that it was not good enough, not feel that it was, it would withstand, or even that I cared what other people thought of it, because it was me. And we talk about how do you define you, and it's that spiritual essence, that who are you when you're sitting on a mat alone with just you and the energy around you. Who are you? Mm-hmm. And when you feel that, you get answers, and you will. And for me, it allows me to hear answers from up above, and it's much clearer than what my ego mind says.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Gail.
Yeah. So I just want to acknowledge Sarah, because I feel like the experience you had is such a beautiful example of you stepping in, well, you being. I don't think you had to step in. You were in your spiritual essence. There was humility there. There was honesty there, right? And you weren't. I mean, I don't know what was going on for you internally, but from my perspective, you just put it out there and said, you know what, I wasn't really quite sure what we were talking about. And then when you explained it, I understood it. And I just love that you shared it here. And you spoke about, you're not new to this. This has been decades for you. And I think that that's the case with all of us here. We've been working on this journey, or taking this journey, for a long time. And on the flip side of that, like, from the spiritual ego side of things, that's something that I notice in myself sometimes, and notice within the community that I work with, is that, oh, well, I've been doing this my entire life, or I've been doing this for 30 some odd years. I don't need help. I don't need help. And that may or may not be true. That might might actually be somebody in their spiritual essence, or that may be somebody in their ego. So I just love that you just put it out there. You named it, you communicated it, and it just seems so perfect. Like, talk about a sourced experience, to be talking about this episode and planning this episode and having it unfold as an in the world, on the court example for us. So bravo. I just want to acknowledge you for sharing that. And then the other thing, the other piece that I wanted to speak to right now anyway, is the ego. What I've noticed is, everybody's here. Well, I don't know if everybody did, but I know David and Scott, you shared some specific examples of what that might sound like. And it's going to sound, some of that might sound similar for those who are listening, or it might sound a little bit different. And one of the things that I've noticed is that your ego will evolve along with your journey. And so it might sound like really harsh or judgmental on yourself, or maybe on others. And then as you start to step more into your essence, it's going to change. It's going to sound a little bit different. I know for me, also interesting that I've caught my spiritual ego a couple of times in the past couple of weeks since we had our planning meeting. And for me, that can look like being overprotective and a little self-righteous. So it's become less of that. You can't do this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I experience that still sometimes, but it's less of that and more of like, oh gosh, I would never say that, or I would never do that. And like, why can't they just give that person, it's become more of that. And, it's the spiritual essence in me who is able to kind of come back to those experiences. Spirit's really good about keeping me humble because usually I'll get the other side of that story that I've made up in my mind. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess, maybe I had that wrong. Maybe my perception was off there. But yeah, so I think the ego is useful. It really can be useful when, as you said, David, right? When you're aware and you're conscious and you're working on this, you're committed to being honest with yourself, being humble, and taking responsibility for those times when it happens, because it's going to happen.
Yeah. So this is a great conversation already. I love how deep we go so fast. There's a couple of things I wanted to highlight here. I don't need help. I believe those were the words you said, Gail. And the truth of the matter is, you're right. You don't need help. You don't need anything, really, when you get right down to the true spiritual essence of who and what you really are. You don't need anything. You may choose, however, to seek help if you are struggling with something. And in that case, I'm sure that you will find it. So there's that perspective. But the other side of the perspective is, I don't need help, might be an ego mind reaction to somebody offering something that, doesn't maybe perhaps resonate with you. In that case, you're not really being open to what the other person is offering, which is some form of love. And so what's that about? That kind of reaction generally comes from some kind of fear. like acknowledging, oh, I'm not good enough. You're telling me that I need your help. You're telling me that I can't do this by myself. You see all the stories that go on with that. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a great line to remember. So I can say, I don't need your help. And I can say that from a place of true spiritual essence. And I can also say it from a place of ego. So the question is, how is my energy when I say it? Right? And you can usually tell. If my energy is something like, thanks, I don't need your help. Well, guess where I'm coming from? I mean, it's pretty obvious. But if I say, thank you so much, I really appreciate the offer, and I'd like to try this myself. Now I'm coming from a different energy. And that, if I can do that, that's generally more spiritual in nature than the previous response. So those are a couple of things that you can tell just by your own energy, how you respond to something, whether you're coming from fear, whether you're coming from love. You can tell right off the bat. Everybody knows this. It's deep down inside. We can't really, I don't think we can not know it. We can ignore it. We can forget about it. We can push it aside. We can say, that makes me weak. That's more ego stuff coming up. We can do all that if we want. Or we can say, I am just who I am, and I'm perfect as I am. I don't need to do anything. I don't need anything in this world in order to be all of who I am. And I think that's just a fair statement about essence. So that was the first point I wanted to make. Second point I wanted to make was, Sarah, I really love that you talked about the comfort zone being, I'm sorry, what's the word the phrase getting out of the comfort zone meant going within. I 100% agree with that. That's probably the scariest thing for most people to do, is to go within and start to, introspect and look at the truth of who we really are. And that is absolutely 100% true. And yet, isn't it ironic that when we talk about doing spiritual work, becoming more connected to our spiritual essence, that we feel a sense of expansion, which is a kind of, moving outward? Isn't that an interesting dichotomy there? So the comfort zone is something that I'm scared to go in because I'm going to expand. I mean, isn't that weird? Or I'm not, it's not because, but you see what I'm saying? It's funny to me how these dichotomies show up. And so I just wanted to put that there.
I suppose I don't know whether it's been lucky or not. I don't know whether that's the right word. Several years ago, I hadn't realized just how much I'd expanded. I was totally unaware of the expansion. And that's just it with me. I don't feel things. I don't see things. I don't hear things. It's just pure knowing. And if I'm not in that place to even be aware of it, to know it, but I used to do work with adults with learning difficulties. And this young gentleman liked to go to the cinema every month. His choice of film was not my choice in any way, shape, or form. And I apologize if I've told this here before, but he wanted to go and see a film called Man Wolf, so about werewolves. And it was just like, one particular scene came up. I could have written the scene. I knew exactly what was going to happen, because it's just horror films and it's so obvious to me. That's why I don't like watching them. And I thought, no, it wasn't that one. It was another one. It was District 9. No, that's about the aliens in South Africa, I think. District 9. I started to feel really unwell, uncomfortable, sort of, and I just didn't know what it was about. Now, the werewolf one was another story. I was feeling really, really horrible. I really wasn't feeling well. And it wasn't until we stepped right out of the cinema building that suddenly lifted. And the awareness that came to me was that while watching that film, the energies of it were so low that what it had done was push all my energies back into my physical body. As soon as we stepped out of the building, my energies were allowed to expand back out again. And every single one of us on this journey, our energies far exceed the physicalness of our body. We don't require our body, physical body, to grow to house our energies. Our energies almost house our body to a certain degree.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah.
A soul may be here to have this physical experience using this physical body, but the energies, our expansion goes beyond this physical form. And that was such an amazing gift. It really was a gift. Don't get me wrong, I really didn't enjoy the experience. I hadn't realized, with all the work that I'd been doing, just how my energies had grown.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Going back to ego mind just a bit, I suppose, again, I feel I've been lucky that somehow I have always known that I'm not here to touch every life. And when I had somebody hear one of my talks one time, he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Wow, you could heal everybody." And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I could, but I'm not here for everybody, and I'm not right for everybody. And there are an awful lot of people who are not ready for what I can bring." I don't know where that person was coming from, but gratefully, I find that, yeah, absolutely, I could heal everybody, but I absolutely know I'm not here to do that. Yeah. So the ego mind doesn't get a look in some respects, but that's a perspective, isn't it? I can do, as you said, I can do this for everybody. No,
well, you could certainly offer it to everybody, but again, some will take it, some won't. Not everybody's going to resonate with your energy, like it or not. And and there was something you said here a moment ago that I thought was important about the body not being big enough to house the energy or something. I have always thought that the idea of the soul being contained in the body was 100% backwards. I've always felt that way. The soul is infinite. The soul is infinitely bigger. Clearly, this body is not infinite. It has boundaries, it has very, very pretty solid boundaries. So I believe that the soul is the energy that uses the body as a way of communicating and getting experiences and all that kind of stuff. But eventually, when it's time to go, the soul leaves the body. Literally, it drops the body rather than the body releasing the soul. So that's my belief. I don't know if that's true or not. So I think that's really an important piece to remember, and I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah. And I know I'm not here. I don't believe for a second that I could heal everybody. I don't believe I heal anybody, frankly. I believe what I do is I offer a perspective, and some people can use that information to find a way to heal themselves. That's what I believe. So that's just my perspective.
100%.
David, what you said, it reminded me of Popeye. I am what I am, and that's all that I am. Strange how clarity comes through animation, right? The discomfort. My family, my parents lived in the same house for 55 years, did the same thing every day. They were very comfortable. If anything upset their schedule, if anything upset and as they got older, of course, it got worse. I'm sure we all experienced a bit of that. That it just, they didn't know how to relate to it. And I continually put myself in points of discomfort. I went for a massage. I always use somebody different every time. And my girlfriend looks at me and says, "You're crazy. If somebody did it well, why wouldn't you go back?" I said, "Because I'm always looking for the next experience." I just had one Monday to someplace I'd never been to, and he did it completely differently. First time I ever had cupping done. First time all of these things, and it was exactly what I needed. And if I had gone for just a regular massage, it was just oil, little fluff and buff, and okay, you would feel better for about 4 hours, and then everything returns. But it's just, I always try to put myself, scratch always. I oftentimes try and put myself in place of I've never been before, because I've always liked the change. I like the rush of understanding, of learning, of knowing something, of meeting somebody new, of all of that, and staying open. And Sarah, much like yourself, I've had people say to me, "Oh my God, with what the work you do, it's amazing. It's good. You could heal everyone." It's like, yeah, okay. Well, I don't do any of the healing. You and I are matched vibrationally at this moment in time, so that we can accept and exchange energies, which is absolutely wonderful. In 2 months, it may not be the same, and it's that vibration when you're in. We've all had those situations in life where everything was great, amazing, perfect. The right people were in the right place. There was a large group. Everybody had the same energy. You get in those and you're like, yes, we could do this forever. 6 months later, it's like, yeah. Who are you?
Right.
After having just that wealth of just good vibes. So it's, for me, it always comes back to, much like you said, coming back in and just allowing. And when I allow, when I listen, when I have patience with myself and everything around me, it all works out pretty well. Amazingly so. Where for years I tried to push it. I was going to make it happen. I was going to change it. I was going to do all of that. It doesn't work that way.
Beautiful. And Scott, between what you and Sarah said, I've just had an epiphany here. So I want to thank you both. Sarah, I think you were talking about all the work you've done and then going into this situation where all of a sudden it felt like that was being crushed down. I would say that situation happens for all of us when we go back to our family of origin after having done many years of work. And then just noticing how we suddenly start shifting back into the patterns that we had with those people before. And so this is kind of in relation to what both of you were saying. I actually had the experience of meeting my brother here in Boise back in, I think it was October, November. I can't remember the exact time frame. I've seen him for the first time in 20 years. And I noticed this now. I didn't notice it at the time, but I had this weird energy going on in my body. And I think now I look at it and I can recognize what I was doing is, in my mind, I was saying, I am not the person you think I am, and I'm going to prove it. Now, if that's not spiritual ego or ego of some kind, then I don't know what is. And that's exactly how I was showing up for him. So I was uncomfortable the whole time and trying to be, like a reasonable human being. And I think I must have tripped over my tongue like 20 times or something, trying somehow to fit in and trying somehow to be who I really am at the same time. It is very uncomfortable when you're thrust back into those situations that don't allow you to express the kind of being you have, or I shouldn't say they don't allow you to, but they inhibit you in some way from expressing the person that you believe you are now. Right? So I just wanted to share that, and I wanted to thank you both for helping me to see this as I was listening to you.
I want to touch on the healing discussion, conversation. And I think what you just shared, David, kind of falls into this. I'm with you, in agreement with you all, that, where it's when we are being in our, well, I think when we're being who we are, whether that's in our ego or in our essence, we are able to activate healing in others. How they respond to that, who knows? They might be receptive to it. They might be resistant to it. And I actually believe, or I'm starting to believe, I don't think I always believe this, but whether they're receptive or resistant, it's an opportunity for healing, and it's an opportunity for growth. And it's not, I show up in this room and you have a response to me and you're healing. It's a two-way street, right? So I'm showing up as me, as authentically as I can be, or not. You're having a response to that, and I'm having a response to you. And so I think that when we are aware, it's really interesting, because it's in some ways, it's when I hear myself starting to say this, it's like, wow, we aren't aware of how powerful and influential we can be. And then we try to be very powerful and influential in each other's lives. Speaking of dichotomies, right? And so it's kind of this journey and exploration of, how can I be a high vibration influence simply by being who I am, simply by being who I truly am. And to allow, as Scott said, to allow whatever happens to be, and to remain humble. I think humility is a big piece of this, and curious, humble and curious. I think that those are keys on this journey. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the show The Chosen on Netflix. It's about Jesus's life. And there's a Netflix docuseries about the actor, Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus. And first of all, watching the show has brought me to tears many times. And watching the docuseries of this actor who's been at his craft for 20 years and has, been in really dark places as far as financially, and who walks his walk and talks his talk. I mean, imagine the responsibility of playing Jesus in a movie or in a TV show. I mean, it's a lot. And to see this actor so humble and so caring and sort of embodying the traits of what you might think Jesus to be. And it's not Jesus, it's this guy, Jonathan. And that's just who you can tell. You talk about the energy, you can tell from his energy that he does not want to get lost in his fame, but he's super grateful for everything that he's receiving at the same time. And it's a balancing act. It's a real balancing act. And I think the more you're on this journey and you start to, I believe God rewards us when we're doing our work, we're taken care of. We go through a lot of stuff and we're also taken care of. And I think that's a new challenge sometimes, where we're kind of used to the struggle and the suffering, and then things get remarkably better. And it can be really easy to fall into, oh, I did it, I made it, I'm here, and get a little complacent. And it's not about that. It's about that deep gratitude and staying humble and staying curious. And it sounds simple, but it really takes work and commitment and intention.
Beautiful. Humble and curious will sound like keywords for another episode. So I'm just going to leave that there. But I wanted to say something about this healing point that you mentioned. I envision healing as a process whereby we find a path, a collaborative path towards wholeness. And wholeness to me means recognizing that we are all one isn't just a simple bumper sticker statement. It's an actual statement of fact. So healing is all about recognizing, remembering that we are all one. And when I heal myself, in a sense, I am healing you. And when you heal yourself, you are healing me. And so we are co-healing sort of thing. And it's all a part of that process of bringing us back into that complete understanding of oneness. That's what I wanted to say. Anyway, by the way, I don't know if you've ever seen interviews with Jim Caviezel, who also played Jesus. He apparently in his movie, what was it called? The Last Temptation of Christ. Is that what it was called? Or The Passion of the Christ. That's what it was. What he went through in order to do that movie was just incredible. Have you seen the movie, The Passion of the Christ? It is intense. Let me tell you, it's one of the most intense movies I've ever seen. And it had me in tears most of the way through.
Was that the one in the 80s?
That's the one that Mel Gibson directed. It's an outstanding movie. And probably not something that you'd want to watch more than once.
Yeah. I'm not sure I've seen that one, but I remember when I was in grade school seeing, it might have been The Last Temptation of Christ. I remember seeing that in the movie theater.
I don't remember I think, well, I'm pretty sure that The Passion of the Christ was more in the late 90s.
Yeah, it was.
So,
yeah.
But anyway, the reason I brought it up is because Jim Caviezel had a very similar kind of experience as a result of having played Jesus in that movie.
Yeah, they talked about him in that docuseries.
Yeah. And and he's a changed man as a result of that movie.
Going back to the healing, I suppose I've always felt, as been said here, the only person you can heal is yourself. You can't heal anybody else. For me, the energies I bring can, if the individual is open. So the intention is always offered for the highest good of that individual, for them to accept or reject as they choose. So it's not I'm not giving the energy, I'm offering the energy. And there is a huge difference between giving and offering. And that's very much how I was taught with the Reiki. And if you're offering that energy, and I offer it to where in that person's life or body they require it most. So I'm not even saying it could be in their life rather than in their body. I'm just offering it to the whole of that individual. But you would, and it's up to them. They can say, yes, please, I choose this. I'm not going to go into want or need. It's I choose this.
Right.
And it then can empower their own self-healing. And it's what they choose to do with that. That has nothing to do with me. I love the work that I do when I help support people with the inner child. Because you were talking about becoming whole, David. To me, that is about every aspect that we haven't known how to deal with, what that aspect of us has gone through. So that child, that younger self, because that could be our teen, it could be in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Now I'm in the 60s, well in the 60s. It could be us of earlier today, of yesterday. If there's been something that's happened and we haven't known how to deal with it, or we haven't had time as an adult, we've said, we'll deal with that later. I sort of became aware that our solar plexus is like a well that we stick all that stuff into. And that's when our illnesses and ailments, stresses and strains come up. And it's there, right, there's something, it's time, it's saying, heal me. It's, I wish to become a part of you again. Because as a child, it's just like, how do we deal with it? We try and disconnect ourselves from that aspect. Oh, we've been told that's not a good aspect of us. I got told off for being like that, so I'd better not be that person anymore if I wish to be liked. So especially if you're in the negative about yourself. And it's helping you to bring that aspect back in. You work with shadow work. It's the same thing. We just do it in different ways. It's helping us to acknowledge and bring back in that aspect of ourselves that we've detached from, that helps us to become whole as an individual. And as we become more whole, that aspect becomes happier, listened to, heard, feels loved. So do we. So does the adult we are today. That negativity, that ego mind, as I said, very close to the beginning, all those negative things we keep hearing that are supposedly keeping us safe, are those aspects, that those things that we've experienced and have potentially actually really hurt us. So occasionally with my ego mind, I will say, excuse me, you think you're protecting me, but actually you're the only one who's hurting me.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah. Very good. And in fact, I that's a really powerful statement, Sarah. I think something that people ought to really take clearly in your mind. The ego mind is more involved in inflicting pain than it is in healing pain, and that's part of the nature of ego. It's always competitive. It's always trying to be right. It's always trying to to be in control. And that's why we go through these processes through our lives of, I hope most people are doing this, of trying to gain control over that ego to the point where eventually you reach a level where you're now in spiritual ego. And now what we want to do is move beyond that and let the ego just kind of do its own thing without being in control of our lives. It's really, that's a beautiful reminder, something that I used to know. And it's like one of those things, oh, I already know that. Well, if you already know that, why aren't you acting on what you know? And the fact of the matter is, I allowed myself to forget that. So it was great to have that reminder, So thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. By the way, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to reach out to both you and Scott about setting up a Reiki session with me online, because I want to understand what this is all about. And I would like to experience it. And Gail, if you do it, I'll be happy to take your session as well. But it'd be fun. I would like to do that. Maybe we can exchange sessions with each other and learn a little bit more about each other's practices. And I just realized I put that on the recording.
Yes, you did, and yes, you have. And many times I exchange practices. I did this past weekend, and it is absolutely amazing. She said, "I'd like to bring more Reiki into my practice when I'm with because I do it intuitively, but I'd like to bring Reiki and try to understand it and see what it's about." And I think is Reiki seems to be different, a little bit different for everybody, as it gets individualized. But it's just the understanding of energy, I think, that really makes it so powerful. I always found Reiki to be the gateway drug to further establishment of your journey. It's the initial step. It's the marijuana of energy. So it's while it's the easiest to understand, it's sometimes the hardest to master in many ways. And being able to feel other people's energy while maintaining a boundary and maintaining separateness while you're in that very, very tight cocoon. So one of the things that, and it just triggered again, is you said, David, if someone, when you're reacting, when someone says, you know, I need help, or I'd like to give you help. And it's, I think for most people, that I've found, is that asking for help is the hardest thing, because it says, I'm not good enough to know the answer. I'm not good enough to do this myself. So I need your help. And there's where ego, you know, you have the ego mind as a structure, but ego as in, you know, I'm pretty good. I can do all that. But it's different perspectives. It's, I think, why we've all kind of looked at different modalities as well as Reiki, to be able to have different perceptions of the same thing and how it's explained and how it's seen, so that we can fully understand. Curiosity and humility, and by the way, a shared sense of humor. So a couple asked me what is the important thing in marriage, in a long relationship, and I said a shared sense of humor, because it will get you through most things. A curiosity, because you're always willing and open to be able to hear a different perspective, and being humble that you don't always have to be right.
Right.
And I bring
And
that
by
all
the
back
way,
into myself.
being humble doesn't mean you have to humiliate yourself.
Oh gosh, no.
There's a
Right.
relationship between humility and humiliation, and people tend to mistake one for the other. They're not the same.
No.
So yeah. Gail.
Yeah, I love what you said, Sarah, about, you know, like, talk, those who are listening, talk to your ego when you catch yourself. I think that that's how you make your ego useful, right? You can let it run the show, you can villainize it, or you can actually work with it. The intellectual mind, the ego, is there to support the intuitive piece of you and the intuitive mind. And I love how you said, you know, you just had that conversation like as if it were a friend, right? Like if it was somebody who was, you know, thought that they might be helping you, but really they weren't. They were hurting you. You were being blunt and direct and honest. And I just love that you shared that. And I think that that can be a powerful technique when you're working with that part of yourself and you say, hey, this is how, hey, I've got this. And what I need you to do is this, right? You can give it another job, or you can just tell it to, I'm good. I hear you, and I'm all set. I'm in control, or, you know, I've got some ideas. And there's something about that helps quiet that ego mind. At least that's what I've noticed in my experience, where it's like, it wants to be acknowledged. And the reality is it needs to be soothed. And sometimes it needs a job and a purpose.
Yeah. I really love what you're saying there, Gail, because that's exactly what I teach, and I've written many articles about that very topic. One of the things that I learned for myself quite a while back had to do with what happens when my ego is out of control. And well, first of all, I have to become aware of that. That's the first step. But once I become aware of it, then I, as you both have suggested, I pause and I say, okay, what's really going on here? What is it that you want me to hear that I'm not listening to? And I just stop and listen for a while. And often I find that when I do that, my ego mind kind of seems to me like a little child who just wants some love and attention. So if I take the time to just listen without necessarily agreeing with anything that the ego mind is saying, I just listen, maybe try to deepen it, listening to understand, you know, Well, thank you. And help me understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish when you do that. You know, if you deepen the conversation and go to that level, I have found for me that every time my ego mind will come back and say he's trying to do something to make my life better. Well, he's not making my life better, but its life better through me. And I'm thinking, so in a way, you're trying to create love. You're trying to create freedom. You're trying to create something that's beautiful and useful in this world. And maybe you haven't figured out the right way to do that yet. And that's okay. You know, that's okay. So I just say, thank you. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for your efforts to bring more love and blessing and peace and joy and everything into my life. I really appreciate it. And thank you for warning me about whatever you see as a danger. I appreciate that too. Then I say, and I am an adult now. And I have adult powers that I didn't have when I was a little boy and you first came into my life. And I would like to be able to try things. And I want to know that you're there to protect me. At the same time, I want to be in control. Can we make a deal and work that way as partners rather than as adversaries? And often that kind of conversation is enough for me to at least quiet the ego mind in that moment. I may have to do this many, many times over the course of a lifetime, but in that moment, it really helps. And then I do, just by that very nature, get reconnected to my spiritual essence. It's a powerful, powerful process, and anybody can do it. But it starts with that one key element, which is awareness. You have to be self-aware, and you have to be willing to say, there it is again, my ego mind's taking control.
I love the way you've put that. I put it slightly differently, but sort of, and it was, these things speak to people in different ways. It's saying thank you to your ego mind, because for me, its first role that it was given was to be our protector.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever told it it's about time your role changed.
Exactly.
Sort of
give it a new job.
You've done such a brilliant job. You've actually done yourself out of a job. So I look at it this. I look at it this way, that, and I've put it into a business term. The ego mind has been like the accountant of your life who stops you from doing anything. Sorry, accountants, but they're always saying to business, you can't spend this, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. I'm going to change your role from the accountant of my life to the personal assistant to my heart.
Yeah,
because
there you go.
Personal assistants help the CEO, so my heart, to make things happen.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, the personal assistant is still there to make sure there's an element of protection, but they're there to support making things happen. So let's give you a much more happy, more fulfilling role. I do wish it would listen, because I'm very happy for it to be the personal assistant to my heart. There is still time it goes into the accountant.
Well, look, we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to make sure we close out with everybody on camera. All right. So I want to make sure that Sarah gets a chance to get away, because I know you've got another thing going on. So I want to say, first of all, thank you to everybody for a really, really deep conversation. I felt a lot of heart movement happening today. So I just want to say I'm very grateful. And I would like each of you to take a moment or two to share your final thoughts on this topic. And I'll start with you, Sarah, just in case you have to go.
Light language for you all. Ihastanaka hashunamiteama tarante e ika oishinimi niki atakoma kate fehantrana shi no te ka a ye shamanaka te ioma. Namaste.
Lovely. Thank you. Gail.
Yeah, I think my final words on this, I want to bring it back to what Sarah said about her experience at the movies, and, taking into account that people are tuning in
Uh-oh, I think Gail appears to have frozen here.
Yes.
I hope she's not physically frozen. Oh, she's
Oh.
gone now, unfortunately. She might come back, but Scott,
No.
why don't you go ahead and say your final words, and if Gail comes back, we'll give her another
I'd love
chance.
to be able to repeat what Sarah said, but I have no idea what she said. So I just want to wish everybody the ability to be in their spiritualness without ego, that they have the relationship with their inner child, their companion of all of their life on this planet, to be able to have the wonderful relationship, to be able to walk forward and not walk in fear.
Beautiful, thank you. Gail, would you like to try again? You froze there
Sure.
partway through.
I don't know where it stopped, so I'll make it quick. So I was just thinking about Sarah and her experience in the movie theater, and whether you're new to this journey and you're new in your awareness, or you've been on it for a while, I think it really comes back to knowing yourself, knowing your energy, and trusting that energy. Like Sarah, it was so clear you were having this experience of being constricted and restricted. And then that contrast, that very distinct contrast of expansiveness. That expansiveness is your essence. That constriction is an opportunity to pause and get curious. That may be your ego, that may actually also be your essence, but it's a signal to slow down, to get present, and to really check in with yourself. So trust the energy that you're experiencing in those moments.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you, Gail. And everybody, thank you again for being here or for watching this on a recording or however you're seeing it. My name is David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings, and reminding you that you can catch the episode, this one, or any others on my website at Your Life Mastery Coach. I'll see you next time. We'll all see you next time on Soul Empowerment. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.